Hi, I'm Will. I'm the founder of DeversiFi. And wait for my slides to come on. So I'm going to be speaking about what I think is the most exciting thing happening in crypto right now. Pretty much the biggest thing that's happened since Ethereum first launched. And this is a transition that's taking place at the moment where decentralized finance is going from having been in dial-up mode, where it was expensive to use, clunky, slow, to broadband, which will mean that suddenly it'll be accessible to a lot more people and able to be used by mainstream users. And how I'm going to speak specifically about DeversiFi and how we've used that to be kind of the first wave of applications in DeFi upgrading, but also about the overall context of how the rest of the industry is making that jump. And I'm going to talk about layer 2 technology, which is kind of the real revolution that's underpinning that upgrade. So I'll start off with an example of layer 2 and how DeversiFi has used it to completely transform the user experience for people who use DeversiFi. And then I'm going to zoom out and talk about the overall context of this technology, the revolution that's happening, and what we can expect in the next few years. And finally, come back and talk about what DeversiFi's place is and what we see as being our role in the industry to help bring adoption of DeFi to mainstream users. So DeversiFi started off 2 years ago as a simple application running on Ethereum, which looked like an exchange. People could connect wallets and trade, buy and sell different tokens. And behind the scenes, every single transaction that happened went onto Ethereum. And it used a settlement mechanism called 0x protocol, which allowed us to demonstrate this technology, the fact that anyone could bring their funds, deposit, and trade without having to trust any centralized counterparty. And this got sort of great adoption at the time, but it was clear even from the beginning that this was certainly kind of in dial-up mode. So a settlement would cost, even at the start, about $1, and towards the end of kind of mid-2019, it was costing $20 to do a trade settlement. What that meant for the user experience was we had to have a very high minimum order size, and it wasn't an enjoyable trading experience. On top of that, because of the blockchain block speeds, it took about 3 minutes for a settlement to take place. And so early on, we started thinking, how can we solve that if we want this to be used by many more people? And there are a few different options to consider. One, and I think now still a popular option, might be to consider moving to a different blockchain instead of Ethereum. There are many others out there like Solana, Polygon, which present viable alternatives for DeFi, and we're starting to see ecosystems grow up there. But the real draw of Ethereum is that it's still by far the biggest developer community, the biggest community of users who, for example, have MetaMask wallets, and there's a real ecosystem of innovation that's still driven largely from Ethereum. And so we wanted to find a solution that could solve this. We, first of all, started developing something based on Plasma, which was back then considered to be one of the most promising scaling options for Ethereum. But in mid-2019, we met the Starkware team, who are one of the kind of pioneers of layer 2 technology and really zero-knowledge proofs. And so the way that Starkware solution works is that you can take thousands of transactions and in a single cryptographic proof, batch them together into something called a validity proof or a Stark proof, which keeps the same size no matter how many, or pretty much no matter how many transactions you put in. And so this is a game changer cryptographically, but on for DeFi, it also is going to enable a huge amount more scale and better user experience. And the goal we were trying to achieve was up to 100 transactions per second and a potential settlement cost of just 1 cent compared to if you use many sort of applications on DeFi today, $50 or $60. And we were the first team to ever work with Starkware. We agreed to be essentially the guinea pig of working with them to bring this technology for the first time into real production with real assets. And we launched that after 9 months working with them in mid of last year. Since then, this new version of DeversiFi has been live. It's had over $500 million of trading go through it and 660,000 transactions. And the cost per transaction at that scale on mainnet Ethereum with the full security of Ethereum behind it and full self-custody, we never touch any user's funds, is just 25 cents. And that cost comes down really rapidly the bigger we grow, eventually approaching that 1 cent per transaction. And so the experience that we can then offer is very much more similar to what you'd expect from a big centralized exchange and allows us to completely change the audience that we're able to offer this set of DeFi products to. So the other sort of big benefit of the huge amount of extra flexibility coming from that technology is that we could go then from just trading initially to now also allowing people to send funds, swap them, earn yield from all sorts of other DeFi protocols without ever needing to deal with the frustrations and cost of the blockchain. So that's just sort of one example of what's live today on Ethereum. There aren't many applications that have already taken that jump from kind of layer 1 to layer 2 in Ethereum. But if we zoom out a bit, this overall wave is now starting to happen, and over the next year or two will happen to everything that's going on currently in DeFi and allow the audience to grow. So the kind of context that we're within is this overall crypto revolution, the biggest revolution in money this century. And we're now looking at, we kind of started from Bitcoin, where it kicked off with this headline from the Times, Chancellor on brink of second bailouts for banks. And Bitcoin was a reaction to what was considered this centralized power of governments and banks over money and the lack of transparency. And so as a mathematical money for the internet, Bitcoin served a primary purpose of payments and store of wealth. And that was a good start until we had the kind of next wave that came along of DeFi, driven to start with from Ethereum, where you could then have transaction settlement without a middleman. You could build all sorts of other protocols for borrowing and lending, really recreating the entire financial system, but without any of the frictions that might be introduced by middlemen and full transparency over everything. And so really a revolution in what was possible. But the problem with both of these things is that cryptocurrencies on their own, as they were first launched, don't scale. So Bitcoin, as a maximum, can do 7 transactions per second. Ethereum, 12 transactions per second. But we've got to balance that with the fact that DeFi keeps growing. The demand for these products that's been created is looking close to infinite. If we're really going to replace the existing financial system, that's going to keep growing even faster. So already $180 billion of assets, getting close to millions of users who are using this all the time. So if the demand's growing, but the supply of transactions is fixed, the problem that we, of course, have is that the cost rockets. And so today, for most people, it becomes almost untenable to use Ethereum. And it's very much in this slow, expensive dial-up mode. And so ultimately, it's only a playground for whales. Some people who already have huge amounts of money are willing to play around with these applications. It demonstrates the potential, but it's not accessible. But layer 2 technology is the answer to that issue. So we want to be able to include more transactions on-chain by doing more work off-chain and make DeFi fast, cheap, frustration-free, with the end goal, and this is clearly like very early on, layer 2 has only been around and being used with real money for a year and a half at a maximum, is to have complete financial inclusion. So to make all of the tools, all of the innovation that's happening in DeFi available for 7 billion people. So where are we on that journey of trying to achieve that? At the moment, layer 2 technologies are all coming online. That's happened really since January. It's not maybe so visible to those who are outside the industry, but there are now 15 to 20 different ways of scaling Ethereum using in production with real assets. Some of the top ones are Starkware, who DeversiFi is using, but also Arbitrum and Optimism and Loopring, and several others you can see on this list. And all of these have taken slightly different approaches to how to achieve scaling. So one of the beautiful things about the Ethereum ecosystem is that it's not scripted by a higher power, but very much organic, in that all of these teams independently started building different solutions with different trade-offs. Now, if you're a builder in DeFi who's creating an application, that's a real strength, because you don't need to choose just one way of scaling up. You can select the best solution for the particular use case that you want to do. So in the case of DeversiFi, we wanted to focus on trading, and therefore we needed relatively fast finality and very low cost in order to facilitate that, and chose one solution, but others might optimize for flexibility in terms of the types of smart contracts they can deploy. And at the moment, these solutions are in different levels of maturity with different risks, but we're getting to a point now where there are enough really strong solutions available that it's becoming realistic for most DeFi applications to start to think about how they will move to this broadband layer 2 mode. So largely, if we want to look at and kind of categorize some of these solutions, there are many ways you could do it. But one of the clearest ways is to compare those that are offering EVM scaling, universal scaling, where they're trying to provide developer flexibility to launch new applications. And actually, some of the ones here on the left, Optimism and Arbitrum, focus on deploying any smart contract that you could deploy on Ethereum in exactly the same way. And so that's a very easy transition for builders. But what it means is you're essentially getting something that's maybe less well optimized for that particular use case. And on the other side, we have some other scaling and layer 2 solutions which have gone for a more application-specific solution, so tailoring the exact scaling for whatever the user wants to be able to do. That's the case with DeversiFi, that's optimized for trading, with Aztec, that's optimized for private transactions, and several others. And we're seeing now also a bunch of solutions that's kind of in the middle there, where you may get some benefits of the flexible open solution, but also tailor it for the most common actions that users might want to do. So with that context, what DeversiFi really wants to do in this industry is to help to make the most of DeFi, make it accessible for those 7 billion people who eventually should be able to access all of the innovation in terms of open, transparent finance, managing your assets from within a self-custodial wallet without permission from anyone else, borrowing at the click of a button, swapping at the click of a button. And we're backed by many of the top supporters in the industry, including some of the biggest centralized exchanges, many other partners, many VCs and funds. But really, what we see as being kind of our role is to sit in the heart of these different waves that's happening. So first of all, there's the overall crypto revolution that we've spoken about, but within that, this DeFi revolution and the layer 2 sort of technologies that are really transforming what's possible to put onto a blockchain. And DeversiFi wants to really be the kind of hub to enable all of those components to make decentralized finance open to as many people as possible. And right now, the challenges that we're trying to tackle specifically that are stopping most people getting involved in DeFi are the frustrations that most people will have encountered if they've used any on-chain DeFi applications, one of which is cost, but another of which is failed transactions, a very fragmented user experience. Today, if you want to try and explore some of the cutting edge of decentralized finance products, you need to hop around multiple different blockchains, multiple user interfaces, try and connect your wallet, and it becomes easily something which most people would give up on. There's big educational gaps, lack of wallet standardization, and one of the sort of most important ones is the number of steps needed to get in. So you have to kind of dive down step by step into these different layers and explore them, and this becomes completely alien to most people within a few seconds going down that rabbit hole. And so what we've built and what we're trying to offer now is this DeFi hub where you can do everything, or really not everything, but 95% of what anyone would want to do on Ethereum with DeFi without having to deal with that frustration, without having to deal with that gas cost. And the real sort of underpinning of that was this core technology layer of layer 2, but now the kind of user experience possibilities that are enabled through that, without having to compromise a tool on security, a tool on self-custody, is that we can offer really fast swaps, fast and frictionless access to other things in DeFi, for example, earning yield in compound finance without needing to deposit and withdraw directly on Ethereum, and aggregate liquidity from lots of other sources. And so that's where we sort of are now. That's been live for a year and is growing fast in terms of numbers of users and liquidity. But in 3 years from now, where we see the potential for both us and actually DeFi as a whole is to really replace bank accounts for most people. And so for DeFi to become the primary way that many people, especially young people or people in developing nations, will be able to manage their finances, instead of opening your bank account and withdrawing when you want to do other actions like switch it to another currency or pay for services, you could manage everything from your own wallet, use a platform like DeversiFi, whether that's on mobile or desktop, to do nearly all of the things you want to do and be earning interest throughout that process. And whilst that looks unlikely from today's experience of DeFi, we're really not that close, and that's because of these technologies that are moving at such fast rate of change. And so I think in summary, what I really want to say is don't underestimate how fast the kind of layer 2 ecosystem in Ethereum is moving. Do please come and try DeversiFi, and you'll get a taste for what layer 2 scaling will look like for this whole industry within a shorter time than we can expect. And our goal is really to unleash the kind of potential of this for everyone and make it open. So thank you very much for listening.
David, excellent. Thank you so much for that excellent presentation. It's great to see you guys go from strength to strength. We really are actually big fans at SVK of what you do. But maybe I'll just open up to the floor for any questions that anyone might have. Just stick up your shy. Don't be shy. Come on, guys. Let's make it happen.
Yeah. So do you have APIs? Like, can we interact with you?
Yeah. So primarily, the main interface is web-based, but there's you can interact both on-chain and via API to trade. So longer term, actually part of DeversiFi's own strategy is that now that we've built this with our own users, we're packaging the same technology stack so that others can build on top of it. So people who may not want to spend as much time as we did building that layer 2 sort of core technology can then jump a step by building on top of the infrastructure we have.
Yes, lady, how are you? Good to see you today.
Hi. So for people who are not familiar or like not onboarded onto DeFi yet, how do they do it via DeversiFi? Like, what are like some first steps for people to like get on DeFi?
Yeah. So for decentralized finance, today the biggest sort of first step you have to take is creating your own wallet. So you're responsible for your own funds, and the most common one is MetaMask, but we also support several others. But once you've done that, you can start to play around in the ecosystem. Many people might have tried, for example, one or two other basic DeFi apps, but coming to DeversiFi, you would just connect your wallet and instantly be able to then start to buy and sell, earn interest on USDT, for example, and other stablecoins, and start to actually transfer to others without having to pay any other fees or interact directly with the blockchain. What you always have the guarantee of is that, for example, if we went offline, you have access to your funds, and they're still actually in your wallet.
Excellent. Do we have any more questions? Maybe one more lady here. Hi.
Talk me through, wasn't it DeversiFi that recently had this big error transaction?
Yeah, so
what was that?
So DeversiFi was actually covered in the news last week quite a bit, in that one of our users was using the platform and made a large transaction, which was an error, where actually the fee paid was very high. This was due to a series of errors, and we were very lucky that the funds were able to be returned to that user. But this comes from the range of technologies that's being sort of used. And the really great thing, I think, about this sort of technology stack and the platform is that it's very transparent that all users' funds are like completely safe, even when that sort of thing happens to one person interacting, which you wouldn't get, for example, with many like centralized alternatives, where if we were holding, for example, customer funds, you have the kind of issue that that kind of thing can spill over. And we've seen that in traditional finance very often, when like a company could have issues with some sort of transaction, it can affect other users, but that's not the case in decentralized finance.
Will, thank you so much for that excellent presentation. That's a big round of applause for Will, and great to support such a project. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.